Welcome to Rights in Retrograde, a special quarter of the Outright Proud podcast, bringing to you accessible legal developments that impact LGBTIQ people across the globe. We won't be talking astrology here, and the only rising will be rising against injustices. I'm Hala on the Outright Communication team, and I'm excited to be speaking to the one and only Director of Queer Legal Futures at Outright, Michelle Yasudas. Michelle, first of all, why Rights in Retrograde? What's the significance of this series?
Hi, Hala. So, firstly, thanks for having me on, and I'm so pleased to do this with you. And so, your first question, why Rights in Retrograde? So, the title carries a dual significance. Firstly, it aims to spotlight government's efforts to deploy the laws to threaten queer people's rights. Secondly, it highlights positive legal developments, shining a beacon of hope during a period that might pose challenges for some of our star-aligned queer siblings.
Thank you, Michelle, for sharing that. And before we dive in Rights in Retrograde, tell us more about your program and what will Queer Legal Futures bring to Outright.
So I'm very new to Outright. I started in September, and I'm starting out a program which centers law reform, looking at how we can make legal systems and legal frameworks better, centering queer people. Because more often than not, queer people are often forgotten or afterthoughts when it comes to pioneering changes and law reforms. And so it's all about ensuring we create pathways to justice for people who are queer, pioneered by people who are queer. And the activities I have lined up are global. We're looking at different parts of the world, different legal systems, and different communities. And I'm really looking forward to working with all these communities from different parts of the world.
That's amazing. And we can't wait to see all the work that you do. And now let's dive into Rights in Retrograde. Give us more insight on the cases you're going to be discussing and take us through the first one. I think you are going to be talking about Mauritius. So take it away.
What we wanted to do was put out commentary on what laws and how they impact lives of queer people. And so the cases we picked are emblematic because these cases are symbolic and also it will be indicative of different laws and legal battles that may come up in 2024. So it's getting everybody's radars on. And so, yeah, the first case is Mauritius, as you mentioned. And so the Supreme Court of Mauritius gave us an extremely precious decision, and it's one that is close to the hearts of many of us, especially those who continue to live in countries where it's a crime to be queer, by overturning Section 250 on the Mauritian Penal Code that criminalized sodomy, in air quotes. This is inspiring and an enormous victory for the Supreme Court to acknowledge this, because this law is not only a colonial imposition, it sets an example to many more countries, which some of us still live in, where they've actually localized and repurposed and weaponized imported laws, and then they become supposed bastions of local values, when really its origins are colonial and Victorian morality.
In the second case, I think we're going to be going to Japan. So tell us more about that.
So, yeah, I thought maybe we should start this podcast off with some of the really good wins and also some that are quite personal to many of us around the world. So, the Japan Supreme Court, it delivered a groundbreaking ruling in October where it declared a requirement for individuals to undergo surgery before legally changing their gender to be unconstitutional. And this is, first of all, an important decision because the antiquated medical model has been an extreme challenge for people all around the world. And so it's a great step forward, and it's a gift from Japan. And I thought it would be a great time also to acknowledge, to give them a shout out, because we've had a privilege of meeting some of the great legal minds between the efforts of strategic litigation in Japan in December this year. And they were so incredibly generous. They shared information, their strategies, and they have been making their court decisions and activism more accessible to the public and to allies, because we managed to speak to them and I personally mentioned there's so many language barriers and procedural barriers, and this should not be an excuse for us. We should learn how to work together, and they've just been incredibly generous. So we're really hopeful to hear more great things from them in 2024 because they've been absolute gems to me.
Thank you, Michelle, for all of these inspiring stories. But I know we're going to pivot in a second to some disappointing stories and cases. So take it away.
When we're talking about disappointing cases, I wanted to start it off with a positive note because there are many things that we have to think about in 2024. And we're going to start off with how 2024 looks like it could be a daunting year for Russian queer activists to work while being branded as the extremists, and also its surrounding countries. If they attempt to replicate some of these laws, we could be looking at many queer activists across the region and possibly the world being stigmatized just for being queer or doing advocacy. So, where did this branding and stigma come from? The handful decisions that came out of Russia, for example, were quite concerned that it may be a bad example for its neighbors to copy, because we've seen copycat laws in Kyrgyzstan as well as in Hungary. So it's been over a decade of Russia cementing queerphobic sentiments through all public institutions. And in November, an extremely dangerous decision was given by the Supreme Court, declaring international LGBT social movements to be extremists and illegal. What happens is that this has far reaching consequences, and it puts all LGBTIQ people in Russia at great risk, especially activists, because now they've been casted as extremists. I could just take us to Pakistan as well, because this is a country that has been giving us some of the most excellent and progressive laws on protecting transgender rights in 2018 with the law. Disappointingly, but unsurprisingly, it's faced full frontal threats from different branches of government. So if you look at Pakistan's Sharia court, um, when it's charged with interpreting Islamic law, struck down provisions from the very important 2018 Transgender Persons Act. It recognized Pakistan's traditional gender identities and provided for legal gender recognition by self-determination. But this is under threat. And then you also look at the Senate that is also pursuing a replacement bill. So this undermines the years of struggle and incredible work done by the Pakistan queer movement. And we're truly hoping in solidarity that would be able to work with them to make sure that these gains are not completely lost.
So we know there's a wave of laws on marriage equality in Asia moving in different directions. Can you tell us more about that?
Definitely. So right now, I'm living in Thailand, and it's an incredible time. We're on the brink of possibly having marriage equality quite soon as the bills are before Parliament. And this could place Thailand as the next country in Asia to recognize same-sex marriage after Taiwan and Nepal. And also we think about Nepal because despite its decade-old rulings and excellent decisions that have come out of the court, and it dates way back to 2005, many years ago, there's still been some hiccups when it comes to tangible implementation for true marriage equality. And so we've seen Nepal making many gains, and we're also rooting for them for sure. And we could pivot to India, which is, I pause because you can see following the decision from 2018 from the Supreme Court from Naftish, the landmark case, and also, of course, many, many years of remarkable decisions that have gone through India, through the High Court, Supreme Court. The decision on marriage equality that came out this year, it deflated and devastated the hopes of many same-sex couples. It's placed the decision of marriage equality, they've passed the buck basically back to legislature based on the claim that the court lacked constitutional authority to rule on this matter. And personally, there were so many words in the decision which were waxing poetic, waxing lyrical, and human dignity and being queer. But at the same time, it failed to deliver what we were hoping for, a rights-based decision, which gave full recognition to queer people and queer marriages. And to put it blankly, I think many people, especially Indian activists, saw the ruling as a glass half full, but many others' hopes were dashed that day.
So let's wrap up our first Rights in Retrograde episode with 3 takeaways. Michelle?
Okay, so let's try this very quickly. So, firstly, in this context, as the year ends, we can take away that the law can be a tool of oppression or liberation. Oftentimes, we've seen opportunistic politicians may use discriminatory sentiments to gain leverage. And at the same time, we can also see how inspiring it is when courts take a stand on these matters. We collectively play a big role when it comes to law reform and activism because it's work inside and outside of court. Takeaway two would be an independent judiciary is capable of protecting the rights of all, even in the most repressive of environments. And the final takeaway, which I hope will carry us on into the year after and the years beyond, is that where there is repression, there is resistance. So I think it's always important for us to highlight the power within the movement and their work.
Thank you, Michelle, for all of these updates and the 3 takeaways for this retrograde. We can't wait to talk to you next time. And for all of our listeners, please check out the full article that Michelle wrote on this topic.
Thank you so much for having me, Hala. And I must credit you also for being so supportive of this piece and this work. So see you next retrograde, and thank you.